All right, guys, in this video, we're looking at the process of employee induction. So key knowledge 11 of this final outcome in Unit 2. Now, this is another of those processes that you may well be familiar with if you have a job, particularly if you work for a larger business, like one of the more well-known retailers or fast food businesses, for example, that are kind of typical employers of students like yourselves. It may even be that if you've been working for your employer for a while and you kind of have some responsibility now, maybe as, say, for example, a crew trainer for McDonald's, you might have actually even delivered some aspects of induction yourself. So yeah, hopefully if you have a job, some of this will resonate with you and you will kind of get where we're coming from. But if not, either way, by the end of this video, hopefully you'll have a bit of an understanding of basically what employee induction actually is, kind of the reasons for it and the importance of doing it. And then finally, just a couple of examples of methods that can be used to actually kind of implement the process. So the usual snapshot of the study design we can see here where it sits. You can see right towards the end of this outcome. So the purpose and common methods of employee induction. So that's our focus. So first off, I guess the question is, what do we mean by induction? What is induction? Okay, in a nutshell, or a simple definition of induction, the process of introducing new workers to their place of work, their job role, their colleagues, supervisors, management, and corporate culture. So basically, it's that process of, when you have a new employee coming to join the business, it's just kind of making them feel welcome, getting them on board, kind of getting them feel comfortable as quickly as possible and kind of ready to kind of run with the job as soon as possible. So that's kind of the idea. Now, this process, it can be quite informal. So most small to medium-sized businesses won't necessarily have kind of like a formalized procedure in place when new people come on board. It will kind of bit more organic, a bit more ad hoc than that. But large businesses, like I say, your Woolworths, your Coles, your Kmarts, your Big W's, your McDonald's, any of these sort of big, well-known businesses with multiple locations tend to have a pretty standardized formal induction process that a new employee would go through. Now, in terms of this process and how long it might last, look, it could be a quick half an hour. It might take up for a month. Really, this depends on the role and the level of seniority. So if you're joining, McDonald's on your first day, it might be your first shift or something that your induction lasts. It might be just the first half an hour or hour of it. Whereas if you're joining a company in a kind of more senior corporate or executive role, the induction can take quite many weeks. I think when I first came to Australia in 2005, joined a recruitment company, my induction, it was a pretty intensive induction for probably about 3 or 4 weeks. But then the process kind of continued for the first 3 months, kind of on and off. So it can really, really vary. And often, especially with larger businesses, it does incorporate some training as well. So your initial training into the job role that you're going to be doing. Now, these bigger companies, there tends to be forms around it. And again, if you've actually conducted an induction or part of induction with new employees yourself as part of your job, you may be familiar with things that look kind of like this. This is just some examples. So bigger businesses, because they have multiple locations, they like to standardize their processes kind of across all locations. So they tend to kind of have documentation and forms which would be used in all locations, just so that the process is standardized as much as possible. The theory being that, if you work in Kmart in Greensboro, the induction process that you go through should be as similar as possible to any other Kmart in Australia, effectively. So they kind of follow a process. So like they could be check boxes just to make sure that you've kind of covered all the things that you need to do. So you can see an example here, and there's the continuation of that one there. There's another example, a new induction checklist with lots of different categories. Make sure you kind of tick off all of these things as we go through the process, and another example there. So yeah, larger businesses will tend to have these sort of things in place, but probably not so much the smaller and medium-sized businesses. Now, what is the purpose of induction? So, I mean, already from what I've said, hopefully you've kind of got a bit of an idea of why we might do this. But basically what this does, it kind of starts the socialization process for this new employee. In other words, what we want to do is create a sense of belonging for the new employee as soon as possible. You want them to feel comfortable. You want them to feel at home. You don't want them to feel anxious when they're coming to work. So really you kind of want to get them, imagine when some of you may have started a new school, for example, at some point, not at the standard time of year 7. So you may have joined the school since year 7. Remember what that was like for you. You felt much more comfortable and much more at ease once you kind of, you felt like you'd socialized, you'd made friends, made connections. And it's the same in business. You want your people to feel that way as soon as possible, make them feel connected with the business. It's also a chance to communicate the values, the belief, and the expectations of the business. It provides information about the job tasks, so what the actual job involves. I mean, obviously, someone coming to a job might have a fair idea of what the job involves, particularly if it's something they've done similar in another environment before, but it might be completely new to them or kind of a mix of both. So obviously, you're going to familiarize them as far as possible with what they're actually going to be doing. And also, it's your chance to create a favorable impression about the business. You want to kind of, you want to make the new employee feel that this is a great place to work, and you're going to kind of put a positive spin on everything. And I'll kind of come back to that a little bit more when I talk about who you involve in this process. So to some extent, it's kind of like a PR exercise as well. It's like an internal PR. You're going to really focus on the positives of the business. And look, if there are any negatives, and look, there are in most businesses, you're not going to really talk about those in induction because you don't want to put the person off. So that's the purpose. Why is it really important? And it is, I can't stress enough how important it is to go through this process. The reality is that staff turnover. Now, let me just remind you what staff turnover. Staff turnover is this idea of people leaving the business kind of by choice. It's not people leaving the business because you've sacked them or you've made them redundant because you no longer need them. It's people that are working in your business and for whatever reason, usually because they're not happy in the business for some reason, they've decided to find another job. And they might end up working for a competitor or in a completely different area altogether. But staff turnover is those people that are leaving your business that you kind of didn't want to leave and you need to replace. That is not a good thing in business. Staff turnover, you want to minimize as far as possible because there's a huge cost to staff turnover. And that's something we get into in a fair bit more detail actually on the year 12 course. So staff turnover for businesses in the first 12 months is far, far lower if the employees have been through a really solid and thorough induction program. Research has just shown that. So one of the strategies you can use to combat staff turnover or minimize staff turnover, which should always be an objective in any business, is to have a really good induction program in place to get people socialized and feeling comfortable, part of the team, comfortable in their role, comfortable in what they're doing in their job as quickly as possible. If you do that, you're going to see far less people turnover in that first 12 months, which is a really kind of key time. And obviously that's because, those people that have been through that induction are going to feel more comfortable in this new environment. And they're going to become more effective in their job role. And when you feel more effective in your job role, you kind of feel more motivated and happier and, more satisfied in your job. So obviously if you're feeling those things and you've got that state of mind, there's less chance you're actually going to be looking for another job. So it's really, really important. I cannot stress how important a really solid staff or employee induction is. Just to finish that, staff turnover, as I've talked about, it's really expensive. Okay, you've got to re-recruit, and there's a lot of costs associated with recruitment, which we looked at previously. The training a new person, the whole thing. So, like I say, businesses want to do everything possible that they can to reduce staff turnover. This isn't the only thing they do. In fact, in Year 12, we look at managing people, and we look at a whole other range of strategies that can be used to reduce staff turnover. But here the focus is on induction, and this is absolutely a strategy that businesses should be using, and most good businesses do. Now, it costs money. An induction costs money. But you see it as an investment into your staff, an investment into the business. So running a solid induction process, although it's going to cost you money in the short run, is just good business in the long run. Okay, so now going back to the study design, it says common methods of employee induction. So just to cover off on that part, so just looking at some of the kind of different things different ways this can actually kind of happen within the business. Not in any particular order here. And you may do, you're probably not going to do just one of these. It might be kind of from a range of these. And again, this is not an exhaustive list. This is, I think, 5 kind of examples of the sorts of things that might be done. And, any individual business might pick from a range of these things, or it might include other things as well. This is just to give you some examples that you could use to demonstrate your understanding of how an induction might actually work. So the first one, on the job training. Okay, so this is just hands-on learning by the new employee whilst actually performing in the job. So basically, this is where the new employee is kind of coached or mentored by an experienced, and I've said a well-chosen, I'll come back to that, employee. It might take the form of job shadowing. On the job training, gets the employee up to speed pretty quickly with what they're actually going to be doing in the job. So let's go back to the McDonald's again. For example, if you've just joined McDonald's and you're going to be trained on working on the tills, for example, as the first thing that you're going to learn, you might start day one, you'll have a bit of an introduction to the business, might meet some key people, and then they might put you on the till with a really experienced till operator. So someone that's been there for a while, probably a crew trainer. And you might stand there and just observe and watch. This is the shadowing part of it. So just watch them. So you might spend a few hours watching that person, how they operate. And then you might kind of swap over and you'll kind of take charge of the till, and this crew trainer, this mentor, this coach, kind of works through with you and shows you how to do it. And you go through this process of learning how to do the job. And it's called on-the-job training because obviously this is a training that you're doing whilst you're actually performing in the role. And again, in Year 12, we look at the difference between on-the-job and off-the-job training. We get there later. But yeah, on the job is a really valuable way to learn the specifics of how to actually perform in the job that you've been hired to do, basically. Now, coming back to this well chosen, okay, if you are going to basically assign existing employees, experienced employees, to work alongside new employees and be this mentor or coach and be part of this induction process, you want to make sure it's the right type of person. You want someone that's positive. You want someone that, is going to have good things to say about the business. You can imagine if you put someone that's really miserable and, doesn't relate to people or is constantly bagging out the business and maybe the other managers, you can see that that's not the ideal person to use to get someone to feel comfortable, in this new environment into which they've kind of been brought. So you just need to make sure that you are, just choosing carefully the people that you are involving in the induction process of new employees, because they've got to give the right impression. Okay. That's as important a part of induction as anything, this impression that the new employee gets about the business, about the people they're going to be working with, about the job. Just make sure that you choose an appropriate person to work alongside this new employee. Method 2, look, you could have a bit of induction pack. Again, this tends to be the case with large businesses, probably not so much with those small to mediums. So what we're talking about here is a physical folder. It might be an electronic folder, depending on how business works. containing some key information for new employees. So it might include some policies and procedures information. It might include your job description. It might include telephone lists, so you can contact anybody who you might need to be able to contact. Anything that you think is relevant in that particular business to familiarize the new employee with the business and the people that they're going to be working with. Pretty straightforward. And this is generally something that, the new employee can take away and can, refer to later. Method 3, meeting key new people. So meeting team members that you're going to be working alongside, or maybe key managers in the business who might be involved with your employment down the track, anything like that. Again, there's different ways in which these meetings can take place. It could be official, sort of scheduled meetings. It could just be unofficial, walking around the business, introducing them, off the cuff. It could even be like an after work drinks meeting, anything you like. But basically just making sure that the new person is starts to become familiar with all of the employees, which are going to be important to them while they're working in the business. Pretty much straightforward, an extension there. HR managers as well, that might be important because people might need to deal with HR. Meeting key people, method 3. Method 4, e-learning. I guess so this is an increasingly popular method now. Again, probably more for large businesses. Basically just where you're delivering key information via a computer or a digital device. So basically someone logs on to a computer or a device and just goes through like an e-learning module, completing online questionnaires, tasks, modules. You might need to watch some instructional videos. Occupational health and safety is often done this way. You kind of go into this module, it shows you a bit of a video, and then it asks you some questions about what you saw in the video. And then, you answer these questions. And then if you get everything right, you can print out a little certificate and you have your OH&S certificate. This is useful, I guess, due to the flexibility of it and the fact that, your employees could complete this, anywhere. They complete it while they're at work. They could complete it when they're at home, kind of anything you like. Be aware, though, that if you're asking employees to complete it in their own time, that's kind of a dodgy area, because this is effective. If you're asking someone to complete some kind of e-learning module, it kind of really needs to fall within the remit of their work. That, in other words, you need to pay them for it. So you're not really within your right as a boss to say, someone's finished their 8 till 5 shift and say, can you go away and tonight do this e-learning module and make sure it's done when you come back tomorrow? That's kind of against the law. If it's a requirement of the work, it needs to be something that is, the employee's paid for. And the final one, mentoring. So this is, we've already touched on a little bit about, the on-the-job training when you assign a coach, a mentor. This is a little different. This is kind of a bit more of a long-term kind of arrangement. So I'd actually even say this pushes past mentoring. This certainly would start, induction. This certainly would start in induction, but this mentoring arrangement, would generally go on for much longer. So, for example, when new teachers join the school, they're generally assigned a mentor, a more experienced member of the staff, normally someone that works in the same faculty as them, kind of makes sense. And that arrangement normally lasts a year, maybe even the first 2 years of employment for that new teacher, particularly if they're a new graduate teacher. If they're an experienced teacher from another school, probably not quite so long, but graduate teachers, that are kind of new to teaching and new to the school, probably the first 2 years they're going to be assigned. And look, this is someone that just kind of, sticks fairly close to the person, just kind of looking after them, answer any questions, any queries, or at least if they can't answer them themselves, they'll be able to direct the new person on where to go or who to go to answer those questions. Helps them develop their skills and knowledge in the role, and just basically kind of oversees them, looks after them, acts as a sounding board. I guess the issue with often a new employee is you kind of don't know what you don't know. And this whole mentoring relationship can kind of help with that, because, as the mentor, you're kind of steering and guiding that person and introduce them perhaps to information that the new employee didn't even know they needed to know. So this is a really, really important aspect of induction, and like I say, beyond as well. And again, it's if somebody has a really solid mentor, it's going to make them feel far more comfortable in their role, and there's more chance they're likely to stay in a kind of medium to long term in the business and not leave. So yeah, providing continual support and advice, easing stress, and like I say, longer term, not just induction. And that is all there is to induction, guys. So make some really good solid notes on that one. And I will see you in the next video. Cheers for now.